will take care of her. And they said, we are going to, we will do all that is required. And every time, a new batch of nurses came, they were all introduced to this girl, Aruna Schonborg. They had to feed her, clothe her, bathe her. She could not do anything. She's conscious, she knows everything, but she's in a vegetative state. She cannot speak, she cannot move, she cannot do anything. And, in 2015, there was a what should I say, a journalist who came to see her. And this journalist, when she was, when she came to interview the nurses and came to visit this person, she felt so bad about the way this uh, lady was living that, in 2011, journalist Pinky Virani, she approached the courts to give her mercy killing, to put Aruna Schonborg to death, to grant her euthanasia. Now, Aruna Schonborg is alive, she is mentally alert, but she is a vegetable. She cannot speak, she cannot communicate. So, this person took it upon herself to approach the court and say, you force the hospital to give her euthanasia. What do you think? Would you agree to that if you were a judge?
So personally, I would think that that isn't morally right. No matter how many deformities a person may have, physical or mental, it's still another life which God has created, equivalent to yours itself. And this is just my personal opinion, but I don't think anyone has the right to take another person's life here as such.
Okay. Others, what do you feel?
So
Yeah.
if we're gonna look at it with the logic of the abortion thing, then obviously you're going to say it's not right.
Okay. But what do you say?
Um, in this case, I would say no because this person isn't able to communicate what they feel. But if a person is, then I don't think it's right for another person to say no, you can't.
Okay. So each person has the right to take their own life.
Okay, that might have come across wrong. Not exactly. If you're in a condition where it's hard for you to live, and if everyone's consenting to you going in that way, then I suppose it's fine.
So even if one person says no, one of your loved ones says no, I don't believe you should do this, go this way.
But aren't you going to be spending your life in a horrible condition?
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Okay. Others, anyone else wants to give an opinion?
So I feel whenever you have to make decisions such like this, you have to try and put yourself in the person who's suffering. Because all of us think that, okay, yeah, it's not real, it's not that bad, she can survive through with it.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
think
Because
this way it might be justified.
Okay.
if someone thinks that the suffering they're going through will not be worth
Yeah.
the end result, then possibly it's just a personal choice that you I don't know how to put this exactly, but
Yes. I understand. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
feel like uh, I mean, taking from a book which I read. I don't remember the author's full name, but the book was called Jodi, I think.
Okay.
It was the story of a woman who had basically lost the use of all her limbs and everything, and how she struggled and how she turned to God for comfort. I feel like no matter how bad your situation is, if you're mentally still able to process stuff and you're still able to think for yourself, I feel like there's always a way to find comfort, always a way to turn to God. And I feel like it's not like you can't. There's no means for you to not learn about something to find comfort. I feel even if you're a vegetable, like you said, so I think there's still always a way to give yourself comfort, and there's always something to live for, even if your situation is probably the worst you can think of at that point.
Yeah. Others? Anyone else? Okay, let's do a poll. Let me add a question. How many of you would, let me add the question. Okay, just use your yes or no option if you have it there. How many of you would permit Aruna Schonberg to be euthanized? Not a single one. Okay, I have one no. Okay, yes, one no. Okay. Okay, so I take it that it is confusing or you're scared to answer. So, there are different perspectives on this, boys and girls, and we respect one another's opinion, right? My job here is to, and my role here, my desire is to give you a biblical perspective, okay, on what could be done in such a situation. The truth is, boys and girls, we have to understand who owns life. Okay, no matter what situation you find yourself in, even if it is a small baby in the fetus, who owns that life, who created that life, and who has the right to take away that life. And one of the topics that we will also talk about is, capital punishment, right? But who owns life? According to the Bible, it is God. It is not me. I don't own my life because I did not give birth to myself. I did not conceive myself, right? Even if I was born of parents, even they don't have the right to take away my life, right? They would not. But even that, life does not belong to each one of us as human beings. It belongs to God, right? The Lord Himself says in the Bible, I give life and I take away life. It is God who decides when and where and how we move from this earth, right? And death is not the end of each one of us, right? We are eternal beings. That means even after physical death here on earth, there is a life beyond that, right? We are eternal beings. And God is the author and finisher of life also. He is the one who decides whether when I begin to live, where I live, and when I will die. It is not up to me. Okay, if that is true, no, then the next perspective is, what about suffering? What about a person who doesn't have anybody else in the world? There are many, many people today who are senior citizens who are absolutely alone. They are not answerable to anybody else. There's no one to take care of them, right? And they are suffering, they are lonely, they don't have anything else to do, they have no other purpose in life. They just want to stop living. They've lived a full life. And they know that when I get old, after I reach 60, 70, 80 years old, I'm going to have all these problems. There's nobody here to take care of me. I can't live independently, right? So I might as well end my life. That is the concept from which this euthanasia has come, right? And it is called the dignity of life and death, the right to die a dignified death. This is the concept in many countries that have legalized euthanasia. Okay, now, So let us talk about number one, about the authorship of life. Life belongs to God. Number two, suffering. What is the purpose of suffering? Now, let me go back to God being the author of life. Again, the truth is, that evolution, the theory of evolution has made a lot of people believe that we are just higher animals. We are not different from animals, right? And if we can give an animal a merciful death because the animal is suffering, etc., 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 then, why not human beings also, right? It is again an evolutionary thinking. Why? Because evolution itself is an atheistic philosophy. There is no way that a person who believes in God can also believe in evolution, right? Many of you are studying evolution, I know, right from, I know, fifth standard, third standard itself, in our textbooks, it says, oh, the earth is millions of years old and we all evolved little by little from a primordial soup, etc., etc. Even when I was studying anatomy, I told you, that the first few pages of the introduction to anatomy is about evolution. And everything about anatomy, has some evolutionary connection, right? We are taught like that. But there are many people who make it their philosophy. And the truth behind that is, if I am the result of an evolutionary process, then I am no better than an animal. And that is a very dangerous thinking. Not only me, then he is also an animal. The person who is attacking me is also an animal. The person who is doing me harm is also an animal. Right? We are all animals. And so we have the right to kill each other. Right? But God's perspective, dear boys and girls, is that no, we are not. We are different from animals. We are human beings created in the image of God. That is, we have a soul, right? And because we have a soul, right, that makes us distinct from any other living species, different from plants, different from animals, different from any other being on this world, in this world. Number one. Number two, the concept of suffering, right? Again, it is related to my concept of who God is and what is God's purpose in my life. Suffering has a purpose. Suffering is not by mistake. Suffering is not accidental. There is an intention behind which God allows suffering. I don't know how many of you got COVID-19, or people who got COVID-19 or cancer or some other disease. And the kind of suffering that we have gone through, job loss, financial loss, struggling to make ends meet, perhaps in so much of debt, or maybe it could be a broken family, father and mother not able to live together, fighting all the time, violence in the home, so many sufferings we have gone through, different ones, right? Why does God allow that? Right? Many times we blame God and say, God is responsible for suffering. God is not responsible for all the suffering in the world, but God knows and God permits the suffering. Why? Because of free will. Free will. Each one of us are free to obey God or disobey God. When I break the law of the land, it is my freedom to do that, isn't it? Right? I can obey. I have the freedom to obey or disobey. When I disobey, there are consequences. Right? I don't know if I told you, very good friend of mine who was a college student, Ramaya Engineering College. He just came out of the gate and standing on the footpath waiting for an auto rickshaw to take him home. A drunk driver in an SUV came across. This is in the middle of the day, in the afternoon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Came, got onto the footpath, hit him, he flung him in the air and took off. No connection whatsoever, not revenge or anything. He was just drunk, this driver. And this boy, my friend, has been paralyzed from the waist down till today, and he can never walk again. No fault of his. He was a college student at that time. He had to discontinue and he had to go back and live with his parents. And till today, he is there in Kerala. You know, is that the fault of God? No. But God has something to do in your life and mine through the suffering. And only a person who puts his faith in God, you know, we may not know the end result, right? See, very often we assume if I don't know what the end result is, then the suffering is meaningless. But let me provide a different truth, boys and girls. If I believe in a God who will take me through this process, okay, take me through the process, and I can trust God to do something in my life through the suffering. Not only my suffering, through another person's suffering, I also learn. Right? There is pain, there is sickness, there is suffering in this world. Absolutely, no doubt about that. But God has a purpose and a plan in that. If I can believe that, and have faith that there is some reason why God is allowing this in my life, then I will realize that I have no right to take somebody else's life. Right? Because I am then interfering with what God wants to do. Okay? That book that she mentioned, Jemima mentioned, is actually absolutely correct. You know, Joni was a young girl, and she had a wonderful life as a teenager. She had a wonderful life ahead of her. There was a man who already decided to marry her, and they were already ready to get married. And then just one morning, you know, she decided to go for a swim, and she jumped off the diving board and she broke her neck in the swimming pool in that jump. And till today, she is paralyzed from the neck down, right? And she is able to, she lived a very difficult life, and she is still being used by God to bless people. Okay. Yes, Anne is saying that's a lot. That's a lot you wrote, okay. So let me ask you something. If the person is alive and the person is not able to give their consent, then who has the right to take away that life? That's what Anne is writing there, right? If the person doesn't want to die, right? If the person doesn't want to die, how do you know that that person wants to die or not? Person is a vegetable, I agree. You cannot decipher the will of the person, right? And there is no one else to tell what is the will of that person. There's no relative, there's nobody else. It's the nurses of the hospital who are taking care of her. You know?
Yes, sir. So that's what I was saying. If there's nobody to give, if somebody wants to give consent on behalf of the person in the vegetable state, that is wrong. I would not allow euthanizing in that case because, again, it is free will. It's up to the person. So, yes, ending a life is never correct. Like, God gives life, it's up to Him. This is not in our hands. But from a legal, logical standpoint, if somebody is in a vegetable state and they can't speak, I would keep that life because it's still a human life. But if they're not in a vegetable state, if they have an illness without a cure, or they're living in handicap and they say that they want to end their life, I would allow it because it all comes down to free will is what I believe, because something might be biblically or ethically wrong, but God has still given us the choice to do what we want, right?
So God has given us the choice to do right and wrong. So is it okay to do that wrong? That's the point, actually.
I don't think it's there are some things that are wrong. Like there is a limit to what is right and wrong, but this is very in the gray. Uh, Same with abortion. It's biblically wrong, but I don't know how that would look from a legal different standpoint. So
Yeah, yeah.
I just tried to word it as best I could in that very long
No,
paragraph.
I appreciate that. It's very good. And see, these are battles that you must face in your life, because let me tell you, either you may have to face it for yourself, or you may have to face it for a loved one at some point, right? You look at biblical times, they had no medical equipment to prolong life. They didn't have medicines. Abraham, he would have had a heart attack, he would have had kidney failure, he would have had, some paralysis, some hypoxia in the brain, some blood clot, but he died, right? Today, if I have a heart attack, there are so many procedures to prolong my life, right? So in those days, it was just simple, right? You have a heart attack, you have old age, this thing, that thing, and you pass away, right? But today it is not like that. We have many medical procedures and facilities and machines to keep us alive. Okay, so this is why we have to deal with these issues. Okay, yes, we are talking about legal versus moral and ethical, right? See, there are many countries that make laws. Laws have an ethical and moral base. You're absolutely right. But laws are made by men. Okay? And the laws can change over time. Today in our country, we have a constitution, but we also have a government that is determined to change the constitution. The constitution is not infallible, right? They are ready to change the constitution. What was made 70 years ago and what was made in agreement, for example, I know it's a huge issue, Jammu and Kashmir. There was a basis on which Jammu and Kashmir acceded to India, right? Today, the government says, no, that there is no basis for that. We are going to abrogate Article 370. You can't do that because your ancestors, your forefathers made an agreement at that time with the people of Jammu and Kashmir, with the representatives at that time. Okay, so laws can change. The moral values will not change. The ethics will not change. But laws may change from time to time, which is why Roe versus Wade, in 1973 in the US, that was the law that legalized abortion for the first time in the US, 1973. It was a historic landmark judgment, right, that made it okay for a woman to abort the child. Until then, it was illegal. Okay. Same thing with Ireland. Ireland is a very strong Catholic, Northern Ireland particularly, strong Catholic nation. And they said no to abortion, because of which an Indian girl who knew that she was going to die if you didn't get the abortion, and the nurses, the doctors refused. They said it's against the law, we can't do it. And she died on the table. Okay, so these are moral and ethical dilemmas. Okay, now let me come to the point. We have only 10 minutes left. Okay, there are two kinds of euthanasia. One is active, the other is passive. Active euthanasia is when you actively put the person to death. That means you inject something, or injection, or giving a capsule, giving a tablet and causing the person to die. That is active euthanasia. Okay. Then passive euthanasia is withdrawing medical relief so that the person dies. Withdrawing medical relief. Like, for example, you remove the person from the ventilator, the heart-lung machine, right? Person is a vegetable state. Person, it cannot even breathe on his own. So the person is put on a ventilator, and the person continues to live because the machine is causing the person to live. So you switch off the ventilator and the person will automatically die. Okay. Yes, you stop chemo. There are other types of ventilation, or the other types of passive euthanasia also. For example, in the case of Aruna Shanbag, what will you do? They wanted to stop feeding her. That was the point. That is passive euthanasia. You stop feeding her, she will automatically die after some time. Right? It is because you are feeding her that she is living. You're feeding her, you're bathing her, you're keeping her clean and neat. That's why she's living. For 42 years, she lived like that. Right? So, this girl journalist said, you stop feeding her, she will die. Okay, that is passive euthanasia. Then, there are another two kinds of euthanasia, voluntary euthanasia and involuntary euthanasia. Voluntary euthanasia means the person gives his consent. Involuntary means the person is unable to give his consent, and so the relatives make a decision in that situation. Okay, the doctor will ask the relatives, what do you say? Right, and you have to make a decision. Okay, so what do you think is the best? What is the best option? Active, voluntary, active, involuntary, passive, voluntary, or passive, involuntary. These are the four options.
So if it was up to me, I understand that there's a lot of gray areas and things which conflict in opinion, but I don't think euthanasia as such should be in practice.
Okay, so let me put it another way. Okay, now active, involuntary. It means you actively want to put the person to death, Aditya, without the person's consent. That's the worst kind of euthanasia. Okay, let me put it another way. Right? A person, is... no, involuntary means you don't have consent, isn't it? What you wrote is active, involuntary. So then what is your correct answer? Active, voluntary. Active, that means person says, yes, put me to death. So you will give that person something to put him to death. So that is physician-assisted suicide. Okay, let me give you an answer from a biblical perspective. Okay, again, as I say, each one is, you are free to have your own opinion. Here's the biblical answer. Number one, we don't have to fear death. Okay, that means I don't have to prolong my life unnecessarily. Right? What is a lot of what we do today in terms of medicine is prolonging life simply because we don't want to die, right? And I don't know if you've seen some of these movies about, The Sixth Day was one of the most famous ones, where, they keep on shifting your mind to another body. They make bodies in the lab and they keep shifting your mind, your brain, to the next body, and you keep living, right? Cloning and shifting all your memories and images to the next body. Okay, so what is ideal, boys and girls, is especially when you're in a situation where the decision may have to be made by relatives. There is something called a live will. A live will. That means in advance we tell our relatives that if ever I am in a situation where I am not able to give my consent, or I am in a vegetative state, or I get for example, a heart attack. Okay, suppose a person gets a heart attack and immediately the doctor says we need to put this person on a heart-lung machine, otherwise he's not going to live. In some cases, it's automatic. They, without even asking, they will put. In many cases, they ask the relatives, do you want us to put him on a ventilator? Right? And it is good if the patient in advance informs his relatives, if this happens, yes, put me on a ventilator. Or says, no, don't put me on a ventilator. I am okay to go. Right? The heart attack is, yes, do not resuscitate. Absolutely. DNR means the patient has told, do not resuscitate. He has told his relatives. Or when he has gone to the hospital, he has told the doctor, if I get a massive heart attack and I cannot survive without the heart-lung machine, don't put me on a heart-lung machine. Don't put me on the ventilator. I'm happy to go. Right? That is called a live will. And it is good, that at a certain age, we inform so that our consent is given, whether to put on the ventilator or not. Okay. Number two, another option, especially when it comes to chemotherapy. I'll tell you the case about my mother. My mother had cancer of the gallbladder. And she said at that time, we did the surgery, they removed the gallbladder because the cancer was within the gallbladder, and removed the gallbladder. Went to Manipal Hospital, removed the gallbladder. After that, the doctor said, you must go through chemotherapy. Even though there is no sign of cancer anywhere else, we cannot be 100% sure. So we recommend 5 cycles of chemotherapy. My mother said, nothing doing. I'm an asthmatic patient. For 40 years, I've been an asthmatic. I cannot survive chemotherapy. It is intense suffering for me. So even if it comes, even if cancer comes, I will bear it. Just give me some morphine and I will be okay. I'm ready to pass away. You see, that is again a live will. A person who says, I'm not ready to go through this. I'm ready to pass on. I'm okay. I have lived my full life and I'm ready to move on. Right? So that's called a live will. So this is voluntary, passive euthanasia. And that is actually the best option, where the person gives his consent and treatment is not provided. Treatment to prolong life is not provided. Of course, starving and all that, that is horrible. Withdrawing life support from the person or withdrawing food from the person and making the person starve to death, that is inhumane. Right? And so the best option, if at all there is an option, would be voluntary passive euthanasia. I hope that is clear. All right. All right, we can, if you have any questions, you're welcome to email me, or we can always chat about it next week. Thank you, boys and girls. Have a good day.
Good morning and thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.